Tom never imagined that a simple deal would lead him into something so unusual. He was a quiet rancher, the type of man who kept to himself and worked from sunrise to sunset without expecting anything extra from life. He didn't search for adventure, didn't look for trouble, and didn't go around trying to learn other people's secrets. All he wanted was peace, a small place to rest, and a life that stayed calm. But that day, when he bought an old cabin for just 12 cents, everything changed in a way he could never have predicted. The cabin stood far from any road or ranch. Most people in the area ignored it because it looked too old and too lonely. Some said it creaked too much during the night. Others said it was built in the wrong place, where no one wanted to live. Because of that, the owner, an elderly man, who just wanted to get rid of it, accepted whatever price he could get. Tom pulled a single coin from his pocket, handed it over, and became the new owner. He didn't think much of it. To him, the cabin was just a place where he could store tools, or maybe rest during long rides. It was cheap, quiet, and out of everybody's way. That was enough for him. When he reached the cabin for the first time after buying it, the air felt still, as if the place wasn't used to visitors. Dust covered the porch, and dry leaves moved gently whenever the wind touched them. Tom pushed the old wooden door slowly, expecting nothing more than empty silence, maybe a few old chairs or broken shelves. But instead, he stopped suddenly, his breath catching halfway. His eyes widened, and he wasn't sure if he was seeing things correctly. There, inside the cabin, someone was hanging, not by harm or danger, but physically hanging from a thick wooden beam near the ceiling. A tall girl, perhaps in her late teens, held the beam with both hands and used her feet against the wall to keep herself in place. Her long dark hair fell down past her shoulders, and her eyes watched him intensely, full of alertness. She wasn't hurt, and she wasn't unconscious. She was completely awake, staring at him as if she had been waiting for someone to open the door. Tom did not move. He didn't want to scare her. He kept his hands visible and relaxed, sensing immediately that this girl was frightened. She looked strong, tall, almost towering. But her expression showed uncertainty, not threat. She didn't speak. She didn't climb down. She stayed exactly where she was, gripping the beam like a person afraid to touch the ground. Tom cleared his throat softly, unsure what words were safe to use. I didn't mean to startle you. I just bought this place today. Didn't expect anyone inside. The girl didn't answer. She only tightened her fingers around the beam, her eyes never leaving him. She breathed quietly, like someone trying not to make any sudden sound. He took a small step back toward the open door to show he wasn't trying to trap her inside. "I'm not here to harm you," he said. "If you want, I can step outside. You don't have to be scared." Still nothing, no words. But her eyes softened just a little, only enough for Tom to feel she was listening. He waited a moment, then slowly backed out through the door and stood on the porch. He left it open, letting her know she was not locked in. The wind moved through the doorway, carrying the dry desert scent inside. Tom rubbed his chin and tried to understand what he had just seen. A young Apache girl, tall, almost giant for her age, was hiding inside a cabin that supposedly hadn't been lived in for months. Why would she hang from the beam like that? Why didn't she run? Why was she so afraid? Tom didn't want to force anything. He walked away from the porch and sat on an old tree stump nearby. He kept a respectful distance so she could breathe. He stayed there a long while, letting her feel safe. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and birds hopped around dry bushes. Tom didn't rush. He knew frightened people didn't open up easily. After some time, he stood and walked to his horse. From his saddlebag, he pulled a small loaf of bread and a canteen of water. He approached the cabin door carefully, making sure his footsteps were slow and soft. He placed the bread and water inside the door, but didn't cross the threshold. "You must be hungry," he said kindly. "If you want it, take it. I'm just going to sit outside." He stepped back again and returned to the tree stump. Minutes passed quietly. Then, very softly, he heard movement inside the cabin. Wood creaked. Something touched the floor. Tom didn't turn around. He didn't want to pressure her. Inside, the girl finally climbed down. She moved cautiously, like a person who hadn't touched the ground in days. She picked up the canteen, opened it, and took a small sip. Then, another. Slowly, she relaxed enough to drink more. She tore a small piece of bread and ate it as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to take more. Tom let her take her time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost shaking. "Why are you here?" Tom turned around gently so he wouldn't startle her. "I bought the cabin," he explained. "Just today. I didn't know someone was living in it." Her eyes narrowed slightly, trying to judge if he was telling the truth. "I didn't think anyone cared about this place," she whispered. "It's been empty for long." Tom smiled softly. "I guess not many people wanted it. But I don't mind old things." She lowered her eyes. For the first time, she seemed unsure of what to do next. She stood near the wall, not climbing up again, but not stepping closer either. Tom could see she was tall, much taller than most girls her age, but her posture was small, guarded. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated a long moment, then said, "Nita." "She. And four." "She. And four." "That's a nice name," Tom replied warmly. "Mine's Tom." Nita looked at the open door, as if debating whether to escape again. But instead, she stayed. She pressed her back against the wall, keeping a careful distance. Tom could tell she had been alone for a while. Her clothes were dusty, and her hair showed signs of days without proper care. Yet she wasn't wild or dangerous, just scared, unsure, and trying hard to protect herself. Tom finally asked the question that had been in his mind since he first saw her. "Why were you up there on the beam?" "Why?" Nita looked away. Her fingers twisted nervously. "I didn't want to be seen. I thought someone else came. Someone I was hiding from." Tom didn't push further. He understood that fear could make people do unusual things. "You don't have to hide from me," he said softly. "If you need a place to rest, you can. I won't make you leave." Her eyes lifted slowly. There was confusion in them, like she wasn't used to kindness from strangers. "You won't ask questions?" she whispered, uncertainly. "Only if you want to talk," Tom replied. "If not, I'll keep quiet." She stared at him for several seconds, studying his face, trying to see if he was lying. But Tom's calm expression didn't change. He truly meant his words. Nita finally stepped away from the wall and moved to a corner of the cabin floor, sitting with her knees drawn close. She kept glancing toward the door, but she wasn't ready to run. Tom saw this small change as a good sign. He stayed outside, giving her space, but close enough that she knew she wasn't abandoned. He watched the sun begin to sink in the sky, painting the desert in warm colors. The quiet of the evening surrounded them like a blanket. Nita spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "This cabin was not always empty. My relatives used it, but I stayed behind." "Oh." Tom listened carefully. She didn't say more. But even those few words told him she had been alone longer than any young person should be. He didn't ask why. He let her share at her own pace. As the sky shifted from gold to soft blue, Tom gathered small sticks and lit a tiny fire outside, far enough that she wouldn't feel cornered. He warmed another piece of bread and placed it near the door. She reached for it slowly, then looked at him with a mix of worry and gratitude. The night grew cooler, and the desert wind carried soft sounds of distant wildlife. Tom stayed awake, sitting near the fire, while Nita remained inside the cabin, quiet, but no longer hiding in the beams. Both of them knew something had changed. The fear that filled the cabin earlier had begun to soften. A connection formed, fragile, but real between a frightened girl and a rancher who believed in patience more than force. The night ended with Nita finally lying down on the cabin floor to rest, and Tom still keeping watch outside, making sure she felt safe in the only way he knew how. The morning came slowly, with soft light entering through the cabin's dusty window. Tom was already awake, sitting near the small fire he kept alive through the night. He had slept very little, but he didn't complain. He wanted Nita to know that she was not alone, and that she didn't have to fear anything while he was nearby. When the sun finally touched the cabin door, he stood and stretched quietly. He didn't want to startle her. Inside, Nita was still curled up in the corner, wrapped in silence. But the moment she sensed movement outside, she lifted her head. Her eyes looked tired, but not frightened like before. She watched Tom through the open doorway, unsure how to speak or act. She wasn't used to kindness, especially from someone who didn't expect anything in return. Tom gave her a small smile. "Good morning," he said gently. "I brought more water." He placed the canteen near the door again and stepped back, giving her room. Nita slowly sat up, brushing dust from her dress. She reached for the water, but didn't drink right away. Instead, she looked at Tom, studying him again, as if she was still trying to understand him. He didn't rush her, didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He simply waited patiently, letting her have control of the moment. Finally, she took a sip. Her voice came softly, almost like a breeze. "You didn't go home?" Tom sat on the stump and shook his head. "Didn't want to leave you alone in case you needed something." Nita blinked, surprised. No one had ever stayed for her before. She didn't know what to say, so she lowered her eyes. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, comfortable and calm. After drinking, Nita stood up slowly. Her tall figure filled a large part of the small cabin. She stepped closer to the door. Not outside yet, but near enough that morning light touched her face. She looked at the desert, the wide open land, the quiet hills, the empty sky. She hadn't stepped outside in days, maybe even weeks. She didn't remember exactly. Every day had blended into the next. Tom noticed her hesitation. "You can come out if you want," he said softly. "The air feels good in the morning." Nita touched the doorway with her fingertips, uncertain. But she nodded slowly and took one careful step outside. The sunlight warmed her skin, and she closed her eyes for a moment. The gentle desert wind brushed past her hair, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. Tom didn't stare at her or make her uncomfortable. He simply stood nearby, quiet and respectful. After a few moments, he asked gently, "Do you feel better now?" She nodded. "I haven't been outside much," she admitted. "I thought someone unwanted might come." Tom didn't know all the details yet, but he understood enough to be patient. "You're safe now," he said. "No one is looking to bother you here." Nita looked around again, taking in the wide landscape as if she needed to remind herself that nothing dangerous was near. She breathed deeper, her chest rising slowly. The tension in her shoulders began to release. Tom decided to warm up breakfast. He had a small pot with him, and he placed it over the last of the fire, adding a small handful of oats and water. As it cooked, the smell drifted lightly through the air. Nita watched curiously, then sat on the porch, still close to the doorway as if she didn't want to lose the safety she felt inside the cabin. Tom poured some warm oats into a tin cup and placed it near her. "I know it's simple food," he said with a small smile, "but it's warm." Nita took the cup gently. She tasted a small spoonful, and her eyes softened. "It tastes good," she said quietly. For the first time, Tom heard a small hint of warmth in her voice. Not strong, but enough to show that her fear was slowly melting. As they ate in silence, a bird flew past, landing on a branch near the cabin. Nita watched it with quiet interest. "I used to watch birds every morning," she said softly. Before I came here. Tom listened without interrupting. My family, they moved away, she continued. They told me to come with them. She paused, her eyes lowering. But I thought maybe they said those things because they wanted to leave me behind. Tom frowned gently. Why would you think that? She hugged her knees slightly, unsure if she should answer. Because I'm different, she whispered. Different from others. People look at me strangely. Some think I'm too tall. Too odd. Tom looked at her kindly. There's nothing wrong with being tall. Nita didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back to the open land, watching the sun rise higher. She had heard words like Tom's before, but always from people who didn't know her well. From people who didn't understand the weight she carried. Tom decided not to push further. He finished his breakfast and set the pot aside. Nita kept eating slowly, her mind far away, trapped between memories and fears. When she finally put the cup down, she whispered, I didn't want my family to see me as a burden, so I stayed here instead. Her voice trembled very lightly, like she wasn't sure if she should have said it. Tom felt a quiet sadness for her. You shouldn't have had to hide alone, he said. But I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you're safe. Love. She looked at him with a small spark of confusion. Why do you say that? Tom shrugged lightly. Because people should care about one another, especially when they're alone. Nita didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to people who spoke like that without expecting something in return. She looked away again, her eyes studying the ground, as if searching for answers she had buried too deeply. As the sun climbed higher, Tom stood and dusted off his pants. I'm going to check the small shed behind the cabin, he said. The nails might be rusty. I want to make sure nothing falls or hurts you if you stay here a bit longer. Nita blinked. You're fixing it? I might as well, Tom said with a gentle smile. This place is mine now, after all. But Nita understood the truth. He wasn't fixing it for himself. He was fixing it for her. She followed him with her eyes as he walked toward the shed. She didn't go with him, but she watched closely as he repaired a loose plank and cleaned away dry leaves. His simple actions confused her. Most people she had met were too busy or too distant to do something kind without being asked. After a while, Tom returned and sat on the porch near her, still keeping a polite distance. Nita stared at him again, her brows slightly pulled together. You ask no questions, she said softly. You don't force me to explain anything. Tom looked at her calmly. You'll tell me when you're ready. She swallowed. That simple answer touched her more deeply than she expected. Hours passed like this, quiet, gentle, full of moments where she slowly began to trust him. She stepped further away from the doorway. She walked a few steps into the open area in front of the cabin. She even reached up to touch a branch above her head, testing how long it had been since she felt sunlight fully on her face. Tom watched her from the stump, making sure not to interrupt her small victories. Every step she took outside was a sign that her fear was breaking. Every breath she took in the open meant she was rebuilding herself. Eventually, Nita came and sat on the porch again. Her tall frame folded gracefully, and her face looked more relaxed than earlier. She glanced at Tom, hesitating, then spoke in a quiet voice. My name is Nita, she said again. It means bear cub in my family. Tom smiled warmly. That's a strong name. She lowered her eyes again, but a tiny smile touched her lips. She didn't say much after that, but the silence between them felt comfortable, like two people who understood each other without needing many words. As evening approached, Nita looked toward the distant hills. Someone might be looking for me, she whispered, but I don't know if they want me back. Tom didn't let her fall into fear. People can misunderstand each other, he said gently, but that doesn't mean they stop caring. Nita looked at him carefully, trying to see if he truly believed his own words. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe. Tom stood up and gently set new firewood into a small pile. "I'll stay again tonight," he said quietly, "just to make sure you're safe." For the first time, Nita didn't look surprised. She only nodded softly, her eyes calm. The second night settled slowly around them. The desert wind carried soft sounds again, and the cabin felt less like a place of fear and more like a shelter, slowly becoming warm. Nita rested inside, not in the corner this time, but closer to the doorway, where she could see Tom keeping watch outside. Trust had begun to grow, and neither of them knew that by morning, something unexpected would happen, something that would reveal a truth Nita had misunderstood for a long time. The sun rose quietly the next morning, painting soft gold across the desert sand. Tom opened his eyes slowly, feeling the cool air of dawn. He had stayed awake for most of the night again, not because he feared anything, but because he wanted to make sure Nita felt safe. When he turned his head, he saw her sitting inside the doorway of the cabin, knees pulled close, watching the horizon. She looked calmer than before, but something thoughtful lingered in her eyes, like she had been awake thinking for hours. Tom greeted her gently. "Morning." She lifted her head. "Morning," she replied softly. Her voice still held a quiet tone, but it didn't tremble like before. He stood up and stretched his arms. "Did you sleep?" "Huh. Some," she whispered. "Better than yesterday." That small confession made Tom smile. Progress came slowly, he knew, but every small step mattered. He warmed some water and oats, prepared breakfast for both of them, and kept everything simple so she wouldn't feel pressured. She ate slowly again, but this time she sat closer to the porch, letting sunlight warm her shoulders. As they finished eating, Nita looked toward the distant hills again. Tom noticed she kept glancing in that direction, the same way someone looks toward a memory they haven't fully understood. He didn't ask anything. He waited, knowing she would speak if she wanted to. Finally, she did. "My relatives," she began softly, choosing her words carefully. "I heard them talking before they left. They didn't think I heard them." Tom listened with full attention, not interrupting. "They said someone big might take me," she whispered. "That my height might make me a target." She looked down at her hands. "I thought they meant I was a problem, that they didn't want to take care of me anymore." Tom felt her pain quietly, deep in his chest. "Maybe they didn't mean it like that," he said gently. "Sometimes people speak in ways that sound harsh, but are meant to protect." Nita didn't answer right away. She wasn't convinced yet. She had carried this misunderstanding for many days, maybe even weeks. It would not disappear easily. Tom stood and checked the fire, letting her think. After a few minutes, Nita stood too, and walked a few steps into the open land. Her tall shadow stretched long across the ground. She looked strong and graceful, yet fragile on the inside. She spoke again, but this time her voice held emotion she didn't hide. "If they cared for me." Tom stepped closer, still giving her space. "Maybe they looked in the wrong places," he said quietly. "The desert is wide. You told me you stayed inside, hiding most of the time. If they passed by, you might not have seen them. They might not have seen you." Nita stared at him, thinking. She slowly nodded, but she was still unsure. Tom sat down again on the stump, knowing she needed time. He watched as she walked around the cabin, touching the walls, observing the ground, trying to ground herself in the world again. Every movement she made was slow and thoughtful, as if she wanted to understand her own choices better. Hours passed quietly, and the sun climbed high again. Tom repaired a loose board on the cabin wall, while Nita sat nearby, drawing shapes in the dirt with her fingertip. She seemed deeper in thought than ever before. Just when the day felt peaceful, a noise broke the silence. Footsteps. Soft at first, then more clear. Nita's head snapped up instantly. She stood quickly, her tall frame full of tension. She looked toward the hills, her breath caught in her throat. Tom stood as well, alert but calm. A group of figures appeared slowly over the ridge, 5 people walking together. Their clothes, their posture, their movements, all told Tom exactly who they were. Apache. And not strangers, this group looked focused, searching, almost desperate. Nita stepped back instinctively, her eyes widening. "No," she whispered. "Not them." But Tom saw something she didn't. He saw relief on the faces of the approaching group, as if they had finally found something precious they never wanted to lose. He spoke firmly but gently. "Nita, they're not here to hurt you. 70s, 99. She shook her head, stepping further back toward the cabin. "They will ask why I hid. They will be angry." Tom placed a hand slightly forward, not touching her, just showing calm. "Look at them," he said softly. "They're not angry. They look worried." Nita turned her eyes slowly toward the group again. Now that they were closer, she could see their faces. She recognized 2 of them, an older man named Dasan and a woman named Tiva. The moment they saw Nita, their steps quickened. Their faces lit with relief and emotion. "Nita," the older woman cried, her voice breaking. The sound hit Nita like lightning. Her breath shook. She stared as if unsure whether the moment was real or imagined. Tom whispered, "They were looking for you." The group reached the cabin quickly. The elders approached Nita, stopping just a few steps away. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't scold her. They didn't show anger. Only relief. One of the men spoke gently. "We searched everywhere. We feared something happened to you." Nita blinked, confused. "You looked for me?" The older woman stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Of course. You disappeared. We were afraid someone took you. You thought we would leave you behind?" "Never." Nita's tall frame trembled. She stood silent, unsure how to respond. All the fear she carried for weeks began to melt. But she didn't know how to let go of it yet. Tom stayed beside her but didn't interfere. He knew this moment was hers. The older man, Dasan, looked at Tom with gratitude. "You watched over her," he said. "We thank you for that. You kept her safe." Tom shook his head humbly. "She kept herself safe. I just gave her water and fire." But Dasan smiled. "Sometimes a person needs more than food or water. Sometimes they need another soul to sit beside them so they don't disappear inside themselves." Nita looked at her elders, her eyes slowly filling with understanding. "I heard you say people might take me," she whispered. I thought it meant you didn't want me anymore." The woman, Tiva, quickly shook her head, stepping closer. "We said that because we worried for you. You are tall, strong, different in ways that make you important, not unwanted. We feared others might not understand you, might try to take advantage. We wanted to protect you, not abandon you." Nita's lips parted slightly. She swallowed hard, the truth sinking in deeper with every word. All this time, she had misunderstood. She had feared the wrong thing. She had believed the wrong meaning. Tom watched quietly, feeling a soft relief himself. It made sense now, everything she said, everything she feared. A simple misunderstanding had made her hide in a cabin alone, thinking she was unneeded when she was actually deeply valued. Dasan spoke again, his voice warm. "You are part of us, Nita. You always were. We would never leave you behind." Nita felt her knees weaken slightly. Her tall frame shook as she breathed in and out. She looked at Tom, as if needing someone outside her tribe to confirm this new truth. Tom nodded gently. "They mean it." Nita turned back to her relatives. For the first time since they arrived, she took a small step forward. The movement was slow, uncertain, but full of courage. She whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't understand." Tiva smiled warmly. "Now you do. That is enough." The group stood there together, the warm sun shining over them. silence holding them in a gentle embrace. Nita's eyes softened completely, her heart beginning to accept what her fear had denied her. She was never unwanted. She was needed. She was loved. And the misunderstanding that had stolen her peace was finally being cleared. Tom stepped back quietly, giving the family space. He watched them talk softly, reconnecting with words and gestures that held years of trust behind them. But he didn't leave. He knew Nita wasn't ready to choose anything, yet not without thinking. As the sun moved across the sky, the group explained their search, their worries, and how they had followed old trails across the desert, hoping to find her. Nita listened closely, each word healing a place in her heart that had been hurting for too long. The day ended softly, with Nita standing between two worlds, her tribes and the quiet ranchers, and realizing that both had a place in her life she never expected. The evening settled slowly over the desert, wrapping everything in soft orange light. Nita stood quietly with her relatives, her tall figure outlined by the fading sun. The group had been talking for hours, sharing all the moments that led to her disappearance. Their faces showed worry, relief, and a deep kind of care she had misunderstood for far too long. Tom watched everything silently from the side, giving them space, but still staying close enough that Nita felt he had not left her. The connection between them had grown stronger in the past 2 days, created by moments of trust and patience that neither of them had expected. As the sky darkened, Dasan, the elder of the search group, turned toward Tom again. "We will rest here tonight," he said kindly. "It is getting dark, and we should not travel in the desert at night." Tom nodded. "You're welcome to stay. I don't mind." Nita looked at him quickly, grateful to hear his gentle acceptance. She wasn't ready to be far from him yet. Even with her tribe around her, she felt safer, knowing he was near. The group set down their small packs and pulled out simple blankets. They worked efficiently, like people used to sleeping outdoors. Tiva, the older woman, gently placed a blanket around Nita's shoulders, smoothing her hair the way a mother might. Nita lowered her eyes, emotion tightening her throat. She had been lonely for so long that simple warmth felt overwhelming. Tom lit a small fire again near the porch. Its glow spread across the sand, creating a comforting circle of light. Nita watched him, then slowly walked toward him and sat down near the fire. She didn't sit too close. She still had a habit of giving people space, but she was much more relaxed now. Tom handed her a cup of warm water. "You okay?" he asked softly. Nita nodded, though her eyes were still thoughtful. "I'm learning things," she whispered. "Things I didn't know before." Tom gave a small smile. "Sometimes misunderstandings grow bigger when we're scared. Now you're hearing the real meaning behind their words." She looked at her tribe again, watching them settle for the night. "They cared for me," she said in a quiet voice. "All this time, they cared." Reeded sevened. "They cared." "Yes," Tom replied gently. "You just didn't know." A soft breeze brushed across the open land, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. The fire crackled, sending sparks softly into the air. Nita hugged the blanket around herself a little tighter. Even though she was tall and strong, she looked peaceful, almost like a young child returning home after being lost for too long. After a while, Dasan joined Tom and Nita near the fire. He sat down with a tired sigh, though his eyes remained warm. "You kept her safe," he told Tom again. "We will not forget this." Tom shook his head. "She wasn't in danger. She just needed time." Dasan smiled. "Time can protect a person better than a wall." Nita listened quietly, her eyes following the flames. "Tom didn't ask for anything," she said softly. "He waited for me to speak." The elder nodded with appreciation. "That is why she trusted you." Tom felt a gentle warmth in his chest at Nita's words. He didn't do anything extraordinary, he thought. He only treated her the way a frightened person should be treated, with patience. When the fire burned low, everyone rested. The tribe slept in a small circle near the cabin, and Nita lay down close to the doorway, as she had the night before. She wasn't hiding anymore, she just felt comfortable there. Tom stayed awake again for a while, listening to the quiet breaths around him. He looked up at the sky, full of stars, and wondered what would happen next. Nita belonged with her people. He knew that, but he also knew she would need his support for a little longer, until her confidence fully returned. The night passed calmly, and the next morning arrived with soft, pink light spreading across the desert. Nita woke before the others, sitting quietly on the porch. When Tom stepped outside, she looked at him with gentle eyes. "I have to go back," she said. Tom nodded slowly. "I figured you would, but—" Nita hesitated, twisting her fingers slightly. "Will you come with me?" Tom was surprised. "You want me to go?" She nodded. "Only for a little while, until I can speak without fear, until I can stand in front of the others without thinking I'm a burden." Tom didn't hesitate long. "I'll come," he said simply. Her shoulders relaxed in relief. By the time the tribe finished packing, Nita was standing tall and ready. She no longer looked like someone hiding from the world. She looked like someone returning to the path she belonged on. The group began walking across the desert, with Tom riding his horse beside them. Nita walked near him, her steps steady but full of quiet emotion. The journey took hours, but no one complained. The desert was calm, and the morning sun warmed the land gently. As they approached the main Apache camp, the sound of distant voices reached them. When the people in the camp saw Nita returning, a wave of surprise and joy spread through them. Several children ran forward, calling her name. Some adults placed hands over their hearts in gratitude. Nita stopped, overwhelmed. She hadn't expected this many people to care. Their reactions filled her eyes with a glowing softness. An elder woman stepped forward and touched Nita's arm gently. "We prayed for your safety," she said. "You are part of us. You always were." Nita swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. Her misunderstanding had caused so much distance, yet her tribe welcomed her back without blame. Tom stood quietly at her side, not wanting to interrupt the moment. He felt happy for her, truly happy, because he could see that she was finally understanding her own worth. After the first greetings, the elders approached Tom and thanked him sincerely. They offered him water, food, and a place to rest. They listened as he explained how he found Nita, and they nodded respectfully, appreciating his patience. Later, Nita walked with Tom to a quiet spot near a cluster of trees. She looked around the camp, feeling something warm and steady inside her. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know. They cared so much." Tom smiled. "Now you do." Nita looked at him, hesitation touching her eyes. "Will you leave now?" Tom knew the moment would come. He took a small breath. "You're home," he said gently. "You don't need me anymore." But Nita shook her head quickly. "That's not true. You helped me understand things. You helped me feel safe. I want you to visit, not leave forever." Tom's eyebrows softened. "Visit? I can do that. D, 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 D." She nodded slowly. "I would like that." From that day on, Nita's life changed in ways she didn't expect. She grew more confident with each passing week. She walked taller not just because of her height, but because she finally understood she belonged. Her people supported her, cared for her, and reminded her that her differences were strengths, not weaknesses. Tom visited often, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes simply sitting with her near the fire and listening to her stories. The cabin he bought for 12 cents remained standing on the far edge of the desert, but it was no longer a place of fear or hiding. It became a quiet resting place, one that reminded Nita of the moment her life changed. And Tom, the quiet rancher who never searched for adventure, became an unexpected bridge between two worlds. He didn't plan it, didn't seek it. But somehow, his calm presence brought healing to a misunderstanding that had once weighed heavily on a young girl's heart. The story ended not with grand events, but with simple truths. Patience can heal fear. Understanding can bring people home. And sometimes the smallest choices, like buying an old cabin for 12 cents, lead to the most meaningful changes. Nita walked confidently through her village now, no longer hiding, no longer doubting herself. Her tribe welcomed her fully, and whenever she saw Tom arriving in the distance, she smiled a genuine, peaceful smile that spoke of trust, friendship, and a life renewed. Nothing dramatic was needed, no loud moments, just quiet steps, taken at the right time, by the right person. And because of that, what began as a frightened misunderstanding became a story of connection, acceptance, and hope that neither Tom nor Nita would ever forget.